So this lady, Jessica Bennett, managed to do a survey in order to find out how many people are comfortable using inclusive language. She was a little bit dismayed by the results. Now she's trying to cope with them. Says that this gets as one of the reasons we wanted to do this survey in the first place, which was to find out how widespread the sensitivity and outrage over the use of some of these words really was. Interestingly, according to the results, the public is relatively aware that the words exist, and yet what is considered current or progressive or inclusive at this moment can also feel like a moving target. For example, you're not supposed to use disabled person, and instead you have to use person with disability. But the general public is telling to fuck off. Like, they're going to use the language that they're comfortable with, not the made up language by the elites and the academics. And as you can see here, most people, they just use common English. Like, for example, Hispanic is much more preferred than BIPOC or Latin. Like, Latin is actually a slur. It's so unpopular. It goes right next to chest feeding. It's to the point where I even see AOC starting to use Latine. Right? Like, they're noticing, okay, Latin doesn't work. Let's try Latine. It's such a bewildering thing, right? Like, this, it doesn't come from the Spanish language. Like, it's not the Mexicans that are trying to make this, but it's the enlightened American elites that are usually white that are trying to push to remove gender from the Latin language, which makes absolutely no sense because everything is gendered in that language. So no, like, people prefer to use Latino, Latina. People use third world. This is considered to be offensive, but it does accurately represents the country you're talking about, right? Like, you have first world nations that are economic powerhouses and places where everyone wants to live in. You have second world nations that are developing, right? And they're not that good, but they're not that bad either. And then you have third world nations where you have government instability, you have guerrillas running around, you got just complete disorder, places where no one wants to live in. But it's not politically correct. Okay, well, it's not politically correct, but it accurately describes the situation. But what's more interesting is that when you look at birthing pattern, like 34% of people want to use it. I would dare to see one of these people that, likes to say birthing person or birthing parent, go to their girlfriend or go to their wife or go to their mother and actually call them a birthing person. I wonder if they speak like that in day-to-day life, because usually when they say birthing person, it's in the context of a PR thing, like Tampax. We are selling our product to birthing people. Or you have like a Democrat talking about, yes, we are very concerned about the right to healthcare for birthing people, right? It's usually like in a PR type of environment, but I'm literally curious if they go to their mother and go like, hi, birthing person, how are you today? I have a feeling they don't. And this is probably why it's a word that's being rejected. Same with low income. What I find most fascinating is that the word that accurately describes something is very short, right? It's like poor. Poor people. Right? But no, you're supposed to use low income. Like by the time I finish using that word, that poor person might actually get rich. They might actually win the lottery by the time I say low income. And if I say poor, I accurately describe the thing. Like, for me, language is not something that I enjoy. I want to communicate something and move on. Surprisingly, primary bedroom is actually catching on, but I think like it's catching on because of the corporates, right? Like, usually, the only time you use master bedroom is in an ad, I guess, or if you're talking with an architect, or if you're talking with an interior designer, right? Like, that's when you use master bedroom. So because it's probably used by corporations, many of them just adopted primary bedroom, so they're fine with it. But then you also have BIPOC. Like, no one wants to use BIPOC. It sounds like a fucking Pokemon, right? It means non-white. That's what it means. But it sounds like a Pokemon. Like, no one wants to use it. Chest feeding, also, like, the worst is chest feeding. The one that I'm fascinated about is gypsy. And I'll tell you why it's fascinating. Like, they try to make it as a slur. I don't know why. Because I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood with many people from most walks of life. And I was told that you don't it's not okay to say gypsy, right? You should say Roma. So I go to my gypsy friends and I call them Romani, and they told me that they will beat my ass if I keep doing that. It's like, no, I'm a gypsy, you're going to call me as such. What do I do in that particular situation, huh? Like, I would wanna ask the people that came up with the idea that this is a slur, and I would ask, okay, so what do I do in that situation? Like, if I go to the person that's a friend of mine and I call them Romani and they say they will beat me up if I keep doing that, do I, like, violate the political correctness? How does it work? Imagine in America, right? Like, you go to a black person and you call them black, and it's like, if you keep calling me black, I'll beat you up. You call me the N-word. What do you do in that situation? I'm confused. Okay, but it actually happened to me. Not with black people, but with gypsies. So, it is something that I guess the academics haven't thought about. You know, they didn't rumigate it up. And of course, you know, the reason that this happens is because the actual community, like in the case of Latin, right? Like, I'm pretty sure if you go to somebody and you call them Latin, they will say, if you keep doing that, I will beat you up. So they watch, it's literally the same thing. And the reason is that the people who come up with these terms, they never talk with the actual communities that affect them, right? Like, it's not like they're interested in what the Latin community has to say. Like, their idea is to remove gender from language. So in order to show how good of a job they're doing, they're trying to move towards, you know, the Hispanic community and bully them. That's pretty much what's happening. But apparently that this is such a fucking bad and awful idea that the Hispanic community would rather be bullied than to be called Latin. Like, that's actually something worse. But anyway, right, so I found this to be really interesting, especially at the start of the year. This was done on December the 4th, so yeah, it seems that the New English Plus doesn't really catch on, except a couple of words. Illegal alien, I think, is one of the more interesting one, because they want you to call them undocumented migrants, right? Like, in order to, like, remove the criminality from the equation. Because illegal, they will say, well, no human is illegal. Bullshit. If you have a burglar into your fucking house in the middle of the night, you're going to say, yeah, well, he's kind of illegally on my property, right? But they want to make it so that the concept of illegally immigrating into another country doesn't sound like a crime. Which is interesting, because, like, if you're in power, you can literally, like, remove the punishment, right? Like, you can make it legal to go into America without showing any papers or documentation, but for some reason they don't want to do that, but at the same time they want to change the language. It's very interesting. Like, you know, like when the Democrats had the House and the Senate and the White House, like, they could literally pass a law and say, well, you know, coming into America, everyone can do it. It's legally, 100%. Like, you don't need to show any documentation, enough. Why did they do that? Why did they do that? Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.